He's on the floor.
Hi,
Let's see. He's just hanging out.
hi, buddy.
He was actually found as a stray wandering around a city park. So somebody, we assume, had abandoned him. He came into the shelter that I used to work for. He was just kind of dumped in that park, and animal control was called about there being a giant lizard roaming around a playground. So they came, picked him up. Aside from being picked up by animal control and kind of just dumped in a public park, we can only assume that his previous owners were either overwhelmed with just how big he had gotten for being a juvenile 3-foot, 3-year-old lizard, or they just weren't prepared to deal with all that iguanas can be when they are fully grown. When I first brought Blue home, it was definitely a learning curve. There's no such thing as an easy pet. Every animal has its own special needs and personality that you got to take into consideration. So every one of them has something specific that you need to really tend to. Reptiles are a little bit of a special case though, because they do require a little bit extra special care. Green iguanas specifically, they need to have access to ultraviolet light and UV light. They need to have access to calcium and vitamin D. With these guys, they need access to pretty high temperature levels. They need a spot to bask, and they need to have relatively high humidity levels as well. So depending on where you keep them in your house, that can potentially cause some damage. So you got to be aware of mold and different pathogens that can just be present with higher humidity levels. They do need a lot of room to roam, and the larger the enclosure gets, the more difficult it can be to kind of maintain all the environmental levels in an appropriate range that they need to be in. You need to make sure you have the space and the ability to control all of those variables, and that you have the money to spend on it, because they are expensive kids. I've been really fortunate to work alongside a lot of different animals. So I've worked with domestic animals like cats and dogs, and like dogs and cats, they're very sweet. Reptiles are a little bit more kind of standoffish, and the amount of traveling that I've done for work, the fact that you don't have to come home and they're all right if you just like kind of say hi to them and they're doing their own thing and you can do your own thing. That has always been something that's kind of, if I need my space and they need their space, it's a little bit refreshing. My favorite feature of him is probably something that is frustrating for anybody else that keeps iguanas, is just how kind of stubborn they are and also charismatic. So these lizards in particular, are known for having a temperament, which I can relate to at times. So he feels like he very much is an appropriate pet for me. He can be very stubborn. He does have an attitude, and when he doesn't want to be fussed with, he'll let you know. They don't make any noises, but he communicates through a lot of different like head bobs and body language. So he does have a lot to say when he wants to say it. A really common question or comment we get is, why don't you just set him free? He should be in his natural habitat. So we do our best to give our animals, and especially Blue, he lives a very comfortable life. It is not a traditional iguana life by any means, but he does live a very comfortable life. He is very healthy, and we want to make sure that he is happy. So that's why we can't release them into the wild. And again, we're in Pittsburg, Pennsylvania. If he is outside, he's going to be miserable outside because it's not exactly the most ideal situation. So we try to make it as comfortable for him indoors. But that's just a very common question and comment a lot of exotic keepers get asked. And we've thought about it. There's a whole lot of rhyme and reason behind why we don't. And we advocate so strongly for rescuing animals and just getting them and bringing them into a safe space versus releasing them into the wild or even buying them from a breeder, because there's a lot of reptiles that need good homes.